All right, today I brought on my friend Dan Kain. I'm going to get to my conversation with Dan in a minute. Before that, I want to go over just a couple housekeeping things. So first off, thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't yet already, please subscribe to the show to make sure that you can get every new episode downloaded directly to your device as soon as the new episodes drop. And when you get to the end of this episode, if you enjoyed the conversation with Dan, I'm having lots more conversations with men like this in the community. Please leave a review. Let me know what you thought. It really helps the show. And send this conversation to a friend who you think might benefit or you think might enjoy it. Here's Dan. Welcome back to the Male Vacancy Project podcast. I'm your host, Amadeus. I got with me my friend Dan, who is, we met probably less than a year ago, but we share a lot of similar interests and have become good friends since.
Yeah.
So Dan is the founder of Brotherhood DMV, which is an all-men's social wellness group here in the DC area, co-founder of Create Wellness, which is another social wellness group here in DC. He is a strength and conditioning coach and coach at the Conditioning Room, and he is an ambassador for both High Rocks and Lululemon. So
have my hands in a lot.
Yeah.
Keeps me busy.
You're doing a lot.
And I have a full-time job, which we're not going to touch on in this podcast.
Not at all.
For many reasons.
I don't know how you do it all, man. Yeah, I mean, so I wanted to have you on just because you are, I mean, you can tell by that list of credentials, you are a leader in this area, and a leader in this space of men's health and men's mental health advocacy, especially here in the DC area. And so I just wanted to talk about your experience, your life experience, how you got to where you're at, and this kind of stage of life that you found yourself in where you are an elder in the community. So let's just start with you. You know, how did you get to where you're at now? How did you find your voice? How did you learn to kind of take up space, and how did you generally become the man that is sitting in front of me now?
You know that's a loaded question. That's why you asked it. So
absolutely.
I'll start with the obvious. There's a lot. In the last few years of really pushing myself to learn more about myself, I feel like for a long time I didn't recognize how many of my experiences led me to who I've become, which is interesting because you think obviously, you know, the things that happen in your life, your experiences shape who you are. It sounds like an obvious thing, but really starting to recognize the patterns, the impactful experiences, whether they be big T, little t traumas, or the blessings, everything on the spectrum has some impact in who you are now, how you act now, how you show up now. And I think in having more of that internal dialogue over the last couple of years and thinking back to things that happened in my past, because I feel like for a long time in our adolescent, young adult life, you just live, you know, you kind of live with this reckless abandon, and you don't stop to, not to say that I've necessarily stopped now, I'm also still bad at that, but you don't stop when you're at those younger ages to consider why you are the way you are, right? Yeah. And how all of those past experiences in your life shaped you. So to answer that question, I mean, that's a 2-hour podcast in itself, but I think some highlights of how I've gotten to this place and the person that I am today. I grew up, I'd say, quite humbly. We're in a lower middle class, income family. As an only child, I had an older half brother and half sister. They're a lot older than I am. I didn't have a lot of interaction with them when I was younger. I did spend time with my sister a decent amount, and actually something that I've been able to reflect on, and her and I have gotten closer in the last few years, so it's cool to kind of we went on a trip together in Nashville last year and kind of recapped, that was the first trip we've ever done together. And for reference, my sister's 18 years older than me. It's like a whole lifetime,
Yeah.
basically older than me. And then my brother's like 21 or 22 years older than me.
Okay.
So when I was growing up, the only influence outside of my parents that I had were friends and my sister. So I very much grew up as an only child in the household. My parents' relationship with my parents, as I've begun to unpack that more in the last few years of life, there were bright spots, some, and there were a lot of difficult and traumatic experiences and memories. I would say that for better or for worse, my hyper independence comes from, living in a relatively tumultuous household of a lot of arguments, a lot of negative energy, which led to me wanting to, at the time, flee or just be outside of the house as much as I could.
Yeah.
I became a lover of all things outdoors, an avid athlete, built very close relationships and friendships when I was young. One, because I think I always yearned for a sibling, but two, because a lot of the time it just was uncomfortable to be in the house. Parents were either arguing or not talking to each other. Those are really like the only two options. There are few memories, some but few memories of like the quintessential or picturesque idea of family.
Right.
I didn't have that often growing up.
Yeah.
I would say not very often. So that certainly shaped me in a lot of ways. I think obviously with the obvious traumas that come from that come some very resilient attributes, and the ability, while I am still working on regaining my ability to emote and to express and to reciprocate emotion, because the only emotions that I grew up knowing about were anger, frustration, contempt, and not to say that my parents didn't love me. They did very much, but it was obvious they didn't love each other. So I didn't have a very good framework or mentor idea of what love or what a loving relationship should look like. So a lot of that, now understanding how a lot of that impacted me, has allowed me to get to this place in time. And once I started to unpack those things over the last few years of digging inward and wanting to uncover and unpack some of the uncomfortable, it really challenges you to learn something from those experiences. That is, more than anything else, one of the things that I've learned along this path of self-development is how to actually learn something from your experiences, and how to actually take something. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, and it's something that I believe in firmly, that no experience in life is inherently good or bad. We as humans, we place a positive or negative connotation on what happens based on how it makes us feel. And some of that, when you're younger, you can't really do that. It's your body's just kind of learning how to react to experiences. But when you grow up and you're an adult, you have that emotional regulation, the ability to regulate emotion, or to not control but manage your response, manage how you feel about something. When you realize how to do that, I think, one, yes, that's been one of my biggest learnings. And two, when you realize how to do that, it then allows you to take back control in areas of your life you felt were uncontrollable. So in addition to Hyrox and Lululemon, one of the other brands that I'm highly involved with is Creatures of Habit. Sick shirt, promo. It's embroidered.
He's always eating it.
I am quite literally eating my Creatures of Habit Meal 1 religiously.
We're doing our Hyrox workouts on Sunday, and I see you chewing, and I look over, and you just got their bowl right on the corner.
Yeah. Mike Chernow, I got you, buddy. Ad placement. So a part of the ambassador program that I'm a part of with them is really cool. Mike Chernow, the founder, has actually become a good friend. The video that I posted from New Year's Day this year, jumping in the lake, and I had 2025 challenges and a bunch of things to challenge people to do more of. That was actually with him on his property in upstate New York. I was coincidentally went on a close group of my friends from college. We always do a New Year's trip. This year it ended up being in upstate, and I knew that he lived up there. So when I was heading up, I hit him up and was like, hey man, I'm going to be up for the weekend for New Year's. What are the chances you're 1 home or 2 down to like host me or just work out?
Yeah.
And so he hit me back and he's like, yeah, absolutely, man. Come over to the house on your way back. And it was perfect. Headed south and hit him on the way. So got this year, the last few years of my life, I will say, have been on a progressive incline, trending upwards. And I don't say that to allude to the fact that there hasn't been struggle, there hasn't been negative experience, but it's every year I have recognized my own growth, and I have become increasingly more proud of myself and more confident in myself.
That's awesome.
And so when I say on an upward trajectory or trending upwards, it's because despite the tough situations that happen throughout the course of life, I've finally gotten to this place where every year is like I'm learning.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm getting better.
A little better than last year.
Yeah. And so
that's huge.
I'm going to step back as I keep going on tangents. That start to this year, getting to spend time with someone who I consider a mentor in many ways, as a man, also as a business owner and entrepreneur.
Yeah.
He's a badass entrepreneur. Getting some intentional time with someone like that, like really quality time.
Oh, yeah.
We worked out in his home gym, in his garage gym. He's got a one of those wooden saunas out in his property. He's got like 50 some acres of land. Like, it's beautiful. Sat in the sauna, chopped it up, jumped in his little pond. It was like 30 degrees outside. It was silly. Dude, I was sitting there.
Oh.
We were in the water for like 2 minutes. It was some of the toughest 2 minutes of my life. But obviously I'm jumping in there with like one of my idols. I'm like, I'm not fucking getting out of the water.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm gonna sit here up to my neck as long as he sits in there.
But he's got to get out first.
Yeah. Getting that type of experience, just, man, when I tell you, like, last year started a lot of big things for me, which we'll talk about, and Create and Brotherhood that you alluded to,
yeah, and
Lululemon and High Rocks. So many of the things that I do now in my life really just started a year ago.
Wow. But
man, having that experience on New Year's Day this year, I'm like, this is a fucking sign. This is an invitation, not a sign. This is an invitation to live bigger, to live this big life that you have started to move towards, and maybe at times have not fully embraced. There's a lot of, and we may talk about this, but imposter syndrome, my God, if I'm not one of the
something I want to talk about.
Yeah, one of the biggest hurdles in my life, and not that I'm completely over it, but I've made a lot of damn good progress on working through it. This experience was just an invitation to be like, no, this is the year you fucking ascend. Like, yes. You expand, you ascend. I always, at the top of every year, I've done this for the last 2 years now, this is the third, where the beginning of the year, the first day of the year, I write down 3 words that either come to mind immediately or are things that I've been thinking on, meditating on, just feel appropriate for my stage in life, and like they're kind of my anchor words for the year. The first one that came to me this year was ascend. Nice. And it's weird because it's a word that I don't often use in my vocabulary, so It was kind of strange that it came to me. But I'm like, man, this is the fucking year of ascension.
That's awesome.
And in all aspects of life. Yeah. So the point of that Michael Chernow story and Creatures of Habit was part of what they're doing with their ambassador program, which is really unique. We have monthly calls with the ambassador team. It's a very small ambassador team, which first of all is unique in the industry. I've been a part of a lot of ambassador teams. Yeah. So one thing that Creatures of Habit does really well, they keep it tight. The second thing is that this is a fucking tangent, man. I'm going to bring it back in a second. I'm realizing how far away I'm going.
So I'm excited to see how you tie all
It was
this
the
back.
nap. It was the nap.
It was the nap. It's just turbocharged.
Yeah, it was the nap. So a month or two ago, they brought in a guest speaker. That was the other thing that I really love about the program, is they bring in professionals from across health and wellness and all these different areas. They brought in this guest speaker who was basically a storytelling consultant. She works with, I don't recall her name offhand, but she works with content creators, life coaches, public speakers from all across the spectrum to better learn how to tell their own story. And this is where, you see, it's connecting.
Yep.
And so in this conversation, and this is actually a recording that I'm remembering, I want to go back and watch again. It was really cool. We did an actual exercise on the call, and the exercise revolved around extracting stories from your own life in real time. And so she had us sit for a few minutes and pick out some of the most impactful moments of our life, and in moments where you can clearly think back and you see a defined change in trajectory based on that moment or that experience. And so because of this thing that happened, I went in a different direction, right, than where I was.
Right.
And that was a really eye-opening exercise for me, because I hadn't done that before. And I hadn't, this is kind of what I was talking about before, was in exploring what's happened in your life, it's often hard to pick those moments out of like defined trajectory change and how something actually affected you or impacted you and how that something got you to today.
Yeah.
So that I've been thinking on those things in the last few years, but actually that exercise really illuminated for me the way to do it, which is sick. It was like a moment of like, oh, that's the missing key, right, to unlock this process of reflection. And so
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was very much like a tool that was, new tool for your tool belt that was given to you.
Yeah.
I can probably send you the recording. It would be a sick one to listen to.
Yeah, please do.
And so in doing that, back to your original question. Here we are.
Found our way back.
We found our way back. I'm so proud of myself for doing that. In that exercise, I was able to clearly see and define some of the most impactful moments in my life. So how did I get here? Aside from the upbringing, lower middle class, small town, very blue collar, my mother didn't work because she has had physical health issues basically her whole life. My dad was in the military for about 4 years right out of high school, and then went to work for the company that preceded Bell Atlantic that eventually became Verizon. Very blue collar. So aside from that whole nature and nurture environmental impact in my life, some of the big moments, some of the defining moments that I look back on and now realize why they happened. One of the earlier ones, my senior year of high school, growing up, 4-sport athlete, three to 4-sport athlete, pre-middle school all the way through high school, was always like,
Same.
was always of the belief that I want to be a professional athlete. Any childhood athlete, that is your goal.
Right.
there's no, if you love sports growing up, you want to be a professional athlete.
That's the dream.
And so that's context for my senior year of high school. Going into my senior year, got very randomly sick, and it was diagnosed as exercise-induced asthma, which I'd never had asthma in my life, but kind of the first onset of it. And truthfully, I don't have any today. This was like a very isolated incident, which made it weirder. And it was in football camp leading up to the season. Probably one of the more traumatic experiences of my life. But I got sick. The illness, which was this asthma, eventually it found its way into my lungs. So I was having severe respiratory issues. This was over the course of summer going into senior year. And so I had these recurring lung infections, basically. I was going into the hospital, being put under to get my lungs cleaned out and cleared out regularly. And this happened maybe 3 or 4 times. I had to go into the hospital and get my lungs legitimately cleared out. They said it's basically like these infections cause these like little particles that kind of look like small pieces of rice to like build up in the compartments in your lungs. And it's basically like I had a permanent wheeze. I couldn't breathe wholly or normally. And so went into the hospital a handful of times. Very scary when some shit like that happens to you and you're like, oh, this is not the flu. You're like, this is like potentially life altering.
Especially for someone who's been a 3-4 sport athlete for their entire life.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
So had that experience. What it culminated in was when I grew up in my town, religious and went to church with my family. One day I was in church and I just remember being in the pew in the church and like just being incredibly uncomfortable. I was getting lightheaded, sweating, really just nervous and uncomfortable. And I told my mom, I was like, I need to step out, get some air. And so I stepped outside, and it was almost like a very strong sense of fatigue mixed with like a panic attack. I was like so weak and tired, and because of that, I was like, what the fuck is happening? You know? And I was out there for apparently, so I forget if I went back in and got my mom, or if I was just out there for so long and she came out and checked. And I was like, I think I need to go to the emergency room. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I stayed in the hospital that night, but when I was in the emergency room, they ran tests, and I got pneumonia in my lungs. And they're basically saying if I wasn't put on strong antibiotics, get my lungs cleared out again, it could cause permanent damage. I was very close to doing that. And so that was a clear moment of trajectory change, where I spent from ages 7 to 18 living, breathing sport and athletics and fitness.
Yeah.
And having that taken away, essentially. The outcome of that was made it out of the hospital, was pretty good, relatively. I actually made it back to play in my last 2 high school football games. Wildly out of shape, mind you, because I didn't do anything all season. Right. I missed the entire season.
Because it started the summer before.
It started in June, and I got...
So what, that was like 5 months of this?
Yeah, and then I got healthy the end of October.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 4 months of this ongoing. And so made it back for my last 2 high school football games. Those were memories I'll never forget, you know, and how emotional that can be for someone in high school. Man, I remember laying in the hospital that night, just being so scared. And I'm a music lover, and it's something we haven't like necessarily talked about or bonded on, but I very much associate songs to moments in life, like really vividly in my mind. And so there was like a few songs that got me through that evening, but I just remember laying there crying in the hospital, like, what's happening? You know, my future is ruined, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everything I wanted to do is ruined, and you know, you obviously don't have that perspective when you're 18 that you're young and you got time.
Right.
But that was a clear moment of trajectory change in my future, to where no longer could I rely on fitness, exercise, athletics. I had to define myself without those things. And my dreams of going to college to play sports were more or less ruined. I got like 2 offer letters from D3 schools when I was a junior. And I was like, yeah, I got recruited for, you know, football in college. It was like 2 local D3 schools.
Yeah.
But one of them ended up being, one of my best friends went there. I could have and would have played football there. Like, if things worked out and happened differently, I would not have. I ended up going to St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. No regrets. One of the absolute best experiences of my life. But I only did that because I lost athletics.
Right.
I only made that decision to go to a D1 education level school because I was steered away from this life experience, from going down the path of being a, you know, 1 in a million D3 athlete, or 1 in 8 million D3 athlete, right? So having that forced step back and seeing that pivotal moment of change, there's so many of those that I could count, but this one in particular stands out really because it was one of the first that I can now call back to and see from that moment of being 18 and scared and crying in the hospital to the 32-year-old that has built and brought so much into the world in such a short time and has this drive and passion for things that I didn't even know existed or that I would be potentially could be passionate about, right? When I was that kid in the hospital. So using that perspective, taking that exercise of finding the defining moments of your life and seeing that and retelling the narrative and seeing how that changed you. I went on in college to get involved in everything that wasn't athletics. And I still played rec sports and loved it. But I stepped into my own, and in high school, it was still, we talked about this a little bit when we were prepping, like, I've always had an innate leadership capability and tendency. In high school, even middle school, even I was in all varsity club and National Honor Society and FBLA, and was like a executive board member in all of them, and was captains on my track team, and so I did those things, not realizing what leadership meant or was. But because I had those experiences, because I lost athletics, which at that time was the number one thing in my life, thing that I was looking forward to in my life, forced me to leverage more of what I was actually good at and dive into more of what I was good at, being a leader. So took upon a number of leadership activities in college, and I think that was where I first found my voice as a leader, as someone that can interact, can engage with, can communicate with people. And the way that I've come to be able to articulate my words myself really started, I think, in college, through a number of the experiences I was so fortunate to have. My college experience was incredible. Again, I say these things, you always take it with a grain of salt when somebody says something's, incredible and on an upward trajectory. It's like, there's obviously hard shit that happens. There's hard shit that happens to all of us. But it was an incredible experience because I really do feel like that's where I first found myself and saw the glimmer of light of the person that I could become.
Yeah,
is a better way to put it. And so this is all like, I'm tying in a few other things I think that you asked about, but really to answer that question of how did I get here? Like all of us, it's a multitude of moments, a multitude of experiences, good and bad.
Yeah.
But man, if you told that 18-year-old kid, if you told the 21-year-old kid that graduated college that thought he was going to work in sport, I was a sports marketing major, because I lost athletics, I still went down the route of like, maybe I can attach myself in a different way to the thing that I love. And shoot, I'm going to sound really religious as somebody that doesn't claim to be religious, but when life has a plan for you, when the universe has a plan for you, it's funny, I'm just making this connection now. Athletics being turned away in that college, in that high school moment in time, high school experience. I got into college, did sports marketing, and got to the end of school. I really just, after recognizing how difficult it would be to work in sport, and not difficult from like, not to steer away from the challenge, but like, you working in sport after college is like you're selling tickets for $20,000, and I just frankly didn't want to do that. Yeah. Because tying back to my childhood, I didn't want to go home. So I didn't want to have to live at home and commute to, into Philly to work.
Right.
So I was like, I can't do that. I can't work in sport and not make enough money to sustain myself. That hyper independence really started showing up.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I'm going to go in a totally different direction and get a job outside of sport. Again, universe had a plan. It was like, this is not your thing, man. You don't need to, like, stop trying to attach yourself to this thing. This is not what you are meant to be doing. So unbeknownst to me, because truly I'm just I'm making these connections as I'm talking.
No, I love it. Stream of consciousness.
Yeah, the universe had a better plan, and it was not working in sport. It was not being an athlete. Now, obviously, I'm athletic today, but that's a whole different story, and it took a lot of work to get there. So took a different job out of school, went a completely different route, and man, one of the next life-defining moments came up from that. I would say that was one, was choosing the career out of college. But my parents separated in 2016, so shortly after I graduated. That was, let me tell you, if that was a reconfirmation that I didn't want to go home, that was a good one. And I'm like, well, I guess it's a good thing I didn't take that job in Philly out of school.
Yeah.
And so that, man, talk about big T traumas that rear their ugly head later in life. It's a lot of the reason that I'm just now, as a 32-year-old man, like, finding a happy, healthy, loving relationship. But that second defining moment was And an opportunity was another invitation to grow again. And this all ties back to that mentality that I believe nothing in life is inherently good or bad. It's how you react to it and how you act from it.
Yeah.
Right? So these are all opportunities. Anything in life that happens to you is an opportunity to grow, to ascend, to work beyond, and to drive towards whatever life is trying to tell you. And it's really hard to see that or recognize it in the moment. And especially when you're only 21 years old, 22, you don't have that perspective or that mindset to take that experience as a good thing, right? And that it's leading you towards something better. It's fucking impossible to believe that.
Yeah. No,
even as an adult.
Yeah, because when you're in it, you're in it.
Yeah,
and it's like this thing is ruining the life
yes.
that I think I'm supposed to have right now in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big one. So the parents separating, not being able to go back home, not having a home to go back to.
Yeah.
Now parents living in separate places, so your childhood idea of home is destroyed. And that set me off on all right, I'm doing this myself.
Wow.
Course in life.
Yeah.
That was if I maybe unknowingly needed something to cut the cord to my past life and to my childhood.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
And then we step into...
Do you think...
Yeah, please feel free to interrupt me because I'm still answering your first question.
Do you think, and this is tying in a conversation that we had months ago, you were telling me about how you were bouncing around from city to city or spot to spot, never spending too much time in one place, never investing enough in any relationships in one place to establish a sense of home in any place. Do you think that's where that comes from?
For sure.
Yeah.
That all started after my parents separated.
Yeah.
So from that point in time in 2016, I was living in New Hampshire because of that situation happening back at home. At the same time, I got a job transition offer. Wasn't necessarily promotion, but it was a lateral shift into a different part of the role that I was in. Got a transition offer to come back to Maryland area. And I was like, hey, it's closer to home. New Hampshire being 6.5 hours away from Philly, my parents going through this pretty rough divorce, and me really not wanting to be home, but knowing that I should be closer to home to support them individually.
Yeah.
Made the decision to move to Maryland. Moved to Maryland the end of 2016. I was in Annapolis briefly. 4 months of a soul-sucking job. Was like started down the path of, I think, depression at that time. Was there for 4 months, couldn't take it anymore, quit, took a job in DC, moved to Silver Spring. That was February 17. Lived in Silver Spring with one of my great friends from college for 2.5 years. During that time, basically did nothing but eat and drink our way through DC and Maryland.
How old are you?
This was 2017 to 19, so I was 22 graduating school, 15. I was 24, 25, 26, 24 to 26.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
For that age.
Yeah, and I was very much living the young 20-year-old in DC life, which was great. Loved it. Do I have regrets? Yes, but it was quite fun. Yeah. And after Silver Spring, was there for 2.5 years, moved to Arlington in August of 2019 on the back of two actually major inflection points. One being getting fired from, at the time, what was my dream job. And two, feeling the lowest physically that I had ever felt, like having a really, really bad self-image and being pretty depressed, pretty deep in a hole of self-loathing, of not liking the life I was living. I was successful at work. I was the employee of the year at my company in 2019. So that time of living was a very fight or flight time in my life.
Yeah.
No exercise, drinking 4 to 5 nights a week, eating not great food all the time, working my ass off. Back of my parents' divorce, probably 2 years from it. Still wounds, still fresh. Still dealing with that at home.
Probably making all the rest of it worse.
Yeah, and just really having no purpose.
Yeah.
Feeling like I had no purpose. feeling very lost, very unsure of who I was as a man, and then who I was generally.
Yeah.
That was a super, I'd say, looking back, if there were ever a time in my life where I was legitimately depressed, it was probably then. That stretch of time from like 2016 to 19.
I think it's important to recognize that that's not uncommon by any stretch. I think
Living through depression and not being aware of it.
Yeah. And
especially as a man. Because I was also at that time, because of the trauma of my parents' divorce, disassociating from feelings.
Completely. And you were disassociating with work, with alcohol, with all of the other things.
Sure. With the fun I was having.
Right, of course. And I think it's an easy trap for men to get caught into because society tells us we grow up learning that your worth is tied to your profession. And everything else aside, your worth is tied to your profession. Your worth is tied to what you can bring home, to your financial success, the clout that you have because of whatever your job is. And so we forsake everything else to be successful, quote unquote successful, in the work world. And you get a couple of years into that pursuit, and from the outside looking in, you're successful, you're making great money, you're got this new promotion, whatever else, but inside you're just, there's nothing.
I went on this warpath professionally in 2017, this whole period of time, probably the most transformative years of my life by any stretch of the imagination. And that's even considering all the shit that I'm doing right now and the growth and the fucking massive expansion that's happening in my life right now. The most transformative years of my life were 2016 to 2020 for all of these reasons. 2017 got fired from, like I said, what was my dream job at the time at Tesla. And looking back, in light of current events, it was very much a layoff. That joke aside, I remember sitting in my car outside of the office. I got escorted off of the premises.
Whoa.
Was let go midday. Took my work phone, laptop, anything that I had that was company related. Again, these types of moments, if for anybody that's listening and you want to try this activity that I mentioned, it's the moments that you close your eyes and can still remember exactly where you were, what you were looking at,
what you
smelled, what you felt.
Yeah.
Those are the defining moments in your life. That shit that you can really remember. That's what I took from that exercise.
Yeah.
So this was one of them. I was sitting in my car, I was facing the building. I remember the fucking parking spot I was sitting in. And damn if I wasn't loathing myself and crying and was like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
And like, I had this vision for my future and this was not it. Like the sports thing failing, the parents' marriage falling apart, me moving to Annapolis, getting super depressed, hating my job, quitting my job, going back to the company that I loved. I worked for Tesla twice. I left the job that was like the job out of school. Left it because I hated it. I hated my life so much in Annapolis. Took this job with Tesla and then get laid off.
Yeah.
Not even a year later. I was like, actually, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
And in that moment, and this is probably something that men can relate to, I don't regret this feeling or this thought. Looking back, it was absolutely immature, but necessary at that time. You talk about masks and, wearing them at certain times in your life for certain reasons. Sometimes they're necessary. This was one. Was thinking, I'm going to make them regret that. I'm going to show them someday I want somebody in that company that made that decision to see me on fucking TV or on a fucking billboard or, in Forbes 40 under 40, like, which is actually a low key, a personal goal at some point to be in Forbes under 40, under 40. Probably still tied to that. So I got to work through that. But, in that moment, again, we talk about a defining moment and a trajectory setting experience was like, I'm going to make them pay for that and make them regret doing that. And so that sent me on the professional warpath that I was then on the following 2 years, 2018, 19, that unknowingly then drove me deeper into this hole of like self-loathing,
Right.
you know, where for a while I thought it was, I'm crushing and I'm setting myself apart, not even 2 years removed from that traumatic professional experience.
Yeah.
I was then the other end of the spectrum, named the employee of the year at my company in a completely different industry.
Yeah. But you weren't doing any of that out of love for what you were doing.
Nope.
Or anything.
Completely out of spite.
All of it out of spite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which tarnishes the entire experience.
Yep. Funny enough, people always, you know, when you get enough tattoos, people always inherently ask, what does that mean? One of the tattoos that I have, this cracked diamond, it's actually one of the most meaningful. At that time in my company, people used to call me Diamond Dan Kain because I like could do no wrong. Was like,
Nice.
I was a part of every group. I was, you know, leading these charges at corporate. I was like the number one consultant on our contract. And God, if after that experience, I didn't fucking hate that nickname. It reminded me of that self-loathing, that hatred that I had for my life. And I'm like, this is not who I want to be. This is not what I want my legacy to be.
Yeah.
And so I got that as a reminder, the exploding diamond. Not many people in my life knew that before right now.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. You talk about these moments and finding ourselves and having them lead us down paths that we weren't expecting. The universe had a bigger plan again. And the emotion that I had after what some might consider a really high professionally of this is not it.
Yeah.
You know, and then realizing from that, okay, if not this, then what? That was really, and this is all tying to the point in my life where I started my path of self-development and self-growth.
Which I wanted to ask about because so many guys find themselves in this experience. And you know, when you're in it, it feels like there's no way out. Mm. So obviously you had these big impact experiences that caused a fundamental shift in your trajectory. Mm-hmm. But outside of those, what were some of the first steps that you took to start that process? Because to get from there to where you are here, to that Dan, looked like insurmountable.
Yeah.
Like there's no way in hell.
It feels insurmountable.
Right?
Yeah.
Still. So how do you take those first couple of steps to start walking down the path and to start building that momentum and to start believing in yourself and start loving yourself so that you can then eventually get to here?
Yeah. That is a great question. That's exactly where I was headed mentally too. So 2019 was that year of recognition of that. I don't know if it was an all-time low, but it was a low.
Yeah.
And realizing that the path that I was on was not right. The things that I was doing in life were not for me. I didn't want this, and I didn't want to do this anymore. The drinking, the partying, the 4-hour nights of sleep to only go to the office and be in the office for 12 hours, to the non-exercising. That was the furthest point I'd gotten away from exercise and from my health. I was very, very unhealthy, very out of shape. I was gaining weight to a point where I had never seen the numbers on the scale before, and it was not in a good way.
Yeah.
Seatbelt was fitting tighter type of time. And so where I found myself in that time was, I'll point out a few things I think that were catalysts for the change. Accountability. I had someone in my life at the time, really only one person, and actually I've never told him this, and I've never even thought about this until you just brought this up. My good friend Seth, he's a few years younger than I was, so actually at that time he was probably only 23, and I knew I needed to make a change. I knew that a helpful avenue to start down the path of making that change was exercise, because I had it in my life before. Mm-hmm. I knew the benefits.
Yeah.
I knew how happy it made me. So accountability, digging into yourself to think about remembering what you loved growing up and what brought you joy and what brought you happiness, and finding that again, going back to that. Man, the shit that it's so cool when you realize that the shit that we loved as children, how that unbridled and untainted joy that whatever it was brought you, how when you reintroduce those things into your adult life, how much it recenters you.
Oh my God.
And like brings you back to your core.
Yeah.
You're like, that shit was the most raw version of you, the most pure version of you.
Yeah.
And when you're able to find those things again and remember what they were and implement them back into your life, even for a brief moment in time, you're like, whoa, I feel like a kid again. Yeah. That feeling of feeling like a kid again is recentering.
Yeah.
And so finding that again in exercise, I had never, outside of high school athletics, I'd never had like a regular workout regimen. Going to college, I would work out whenever I felt like it, which was not often.
Right.
And then post-college, went to the gym here and there, never stuck. So finding exercise again in a real way, in a dedicated way, in an adult dedicated way. The accountability piece I mentioned because my buddy Seth at the time, he was also wanting to get fit. And so we became kind of accountability partners. And the way we did that, and the third thing, was seeking out content, seeking out helpful resources in the form of content. And this was pretty early on in the podcast era, so there weren't many. And at that time, when I looked up, there were 2 podcasts that I ended up finding that became pillars for me in my life. So the content that I found at that time, the Ryan Niddel Show podcast, and I found Andy Frisella when he started his own podcast too. And both of these guys were very macho, the quintessential like tough love macho men. Yeah. And a fourth thing that I will say is important in starting this journey is identifying what you need at that time to change. And I mean that from a perspective of, how are you going to learn best? Because what I needed at that time was tough love. I needed because I didn't have it. I didn't have a mentor in my life. I didn't have a real male role model to be like, hey man, you got to shape up or this shit's not going to turn out well. Yeah. I did not have any of that in my life because the relationship with my father was strained. He and I have never been best friends. We're a lot better now than we used to be. But at that point growing up, I mean, that was a few years removed from the separation. Our relationship was very strained. My brother, much older than me, not that we didn't have a relationship, but we just didn't have a super friendly one. So I wasn't like reaching out to him regularly. Yeah. The only thing I had in my life were friends, really good friends, but none of them were interested in this world. They were not seeking to better themselves. They were with me partying 4 nights a week. Right. And that was one of the points where, as you know, and as a lot of men find, when you have that initial tickle or like inkling inside that you want to be better than you are right now, you want to be a better person, you want to change something about your life, once you have that thought, you can't let it go. No. Some men do a really good job of pushing it down and saying that's not important or that's not me. Yeah. No, the life that I'm living, this is me. Yeah. But once you have the thought, you can't get rid of it. And so it's really hard because of that to express that you want to change and that you want to be better, because the people around you want, not to say that they wouldn't understand, but you feel like they wouldn't understand. Yeah. Right. And to you, you're like, this is a weird feeling. I want to change my life. Yeah. I want to stop drinking. I want to stop eating like shit 5 days a week. I want to start so much fun. I want to start exercising. It's kind of a weird feeling once you have that inkling. Yeah. And it's intimidating too, because you brought in the friends piece of it. Is like, how does this new
version of me that I want to step into, how does this fit into my group of friends? Like, am I still going to be able to be friends with these people?
Yeah.
Like, our entire friendship is
built around...
And for a lot of guys, especially in the mid-20s, early to mid-20s, I heard someone say guys in their mid-20s don't have friends, they have drinking buddies.
Yeah. Oh, it's true.
And that was shockingly
a lot of guys in their 30s, it's still true.
I mean, yes. But especially for that kind of post-college era, it's so accurate for the vast majority of guys.
Yes. And you're exactly right. The fear that you will no longer fit in where you feel comfortable fitting in is real. And so at that time, the accountability, the finding things that I loved growing up or that lit me up growing up, the content, seeking content, the importance of what I was finding at that time, the importance of the content that I was diving into was, it felt like it was for me. I could put on my headphones and listen to these podcasts and nobody else needed to know that I was, starting my journey of self-development, right? Which at the time you even laugh at yourself and you're like, this is silly.
You're like, oh, I'm going on self-development.
Yeah, this is silly. Yeah. All these self-development books, like this inspirational BS. Again, nature and nurture. I grew up in a very blue-collar place where that type of thing was not talked about or known, really. I
mean, and I remember, like, I grew up around here and pretty progressive area. And even, I remember from my childhood, like, if someone talked about, like, reading self-help books, there was like something wrong with that person.
Yes, they had a problem.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and that's, I mean, shoot, you can apply that.
Why are they reading self-help books?
Yes, you can apply that to any area of mental health and wellness. Absolutely. Of saying that people from the outside will just assume that person has a problem without knowing what's actually going on. But yes, absolutely. That is fucking hard for a 23-year-old that grew up with that mentality of saying, I want to change myself, I want to be better, something's not right. That is admitting that there is something wrong. Yeah. That's admitting that you have problems.
Yeah.
And fuck if that isn't hard.
It's brave.
Right? So finding the content that I actually remember listening to Andy Frisella's podcast at the time, and I talked about the tough love, realizing what way you learn best or how you need to learn to change.
Yeah.
I needed tough love because I didn't have it.
Yeah.
So I seeked it out in the form of podcasts and content. And I was listening to Andy Frisella's podcast. He was very no frills, like basically if you're doing these things, if you're going out drinking every night, if you're, XYZ, then you're a fucking loser. Like that's how he framed it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest, I needed that.
Yeah.
I needed somebody at that point in my life because I did not have the male role models to maybe give it to me in a nicer package, but I needed that raw, unfiltered, you're going down the wrong fucking path, buddy.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing just popped into my head because like I can hear in my head some saying like, stop with the bullshit macho hardo shit.
Yeah.
And I think that there tends to be, obviously it's not 100%, but there tends to be an interesting dividing line where a lot of guys find a lot of value in that extreme hardo shit where here's your fucking mirror.
Yeah.
Are you proud of yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes or no. It's black.
Look at yourself
it's black
in the
and
eye.
White.
Yeah.
There is no gray.
Are you proud of yourself?
Yeah.
And it needs to be that hard.
Yeah.
For some guys, for a lot of guys, to actually, for it to get through our thick fucking skulls.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's interesting, and you're right. That is probably another reason why so many guys are reluctant to change, because oftentimes when you are consuming or taking in content around self-help and self-development, it is coming from it's
usually softer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's coming from a very loving, concerned place where I'm just here to help you. Like I want to help you grow, and I want to help you
to love yourself.
Expand and love and love yourself, and that's great. But most men will hear that and say, fuck off.
Yeah.
Because they aren't open to, they don't it's a lack of understanding.
Yeah.
It's a lack of openness to the thoughts, the ideas.
Lack of emotional intelligence.
Lack of emotional intelligence, sure. But also a very innate and societally constructed sense of, I don't need you to tell me what to do.
Just like independence.
Of independence, and that is a innate male trait which can be used for good or for bad, show up as good or bad. And most men, to the point that we're making, will hear the self-love talk and dismiss it because they feel like it is not aimed at them and it's not directed towards them. But when you have somebody giving you tough love, and I am all about being compassionate and being understanding of somebody's situation in life, how they got to where they are, whatever your circumstances are, validating them and reassuring you that you are welcomed, you have a reason for being here, a purpose for being here.
And recognizing why they're acting that way as well.
Yeah, I am very attuned to those things now.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I still believe that most men need tough love to change.
Yeah.
And most men don't get tough love.
Yeah.
And that is something that, is societally abound now. And I'm not talking about like being physically abused tough love.
Right.
I'm saying from a place of wisdom.
Yeah.
Of someone's own self-love and confidence, and knowing that, brother, if I met somebody else in our community right now here and gave them like a, hey man, like let's talk, and they were doing some self-destructive shit, and I gave them some tough love that was out of respect.
Yeah. And
it's very different than the tough love that people conceptually default to. Yeah. They're like abuse, right. Physical and verbal abuse.
Well, and I think there's a difference. Like, I wouldn't call that tough love. That's just someone in a position of power taking advantage and asserting that power in the form of dominance over someone else for their own little power trip, right? But like what you're talking about is self-love, tough love, emphasis on the love.
Yes.
Like coming from a place of, I love you too much to let you continue this self-destructive behavior.
Yes. Yes.
And so you and I are going to sit down and have a conversation, and you're going to stop this shit.
Yeah. And that is what most men don't get.
Yeah.
And tying it back to, at that time, the things that I needed to initiate that journey was tough love. And fortunately, I found it.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I didn't have it in my life presently. Fortunately, I found it. I found Andy Frisell at the time that he literally came up with 75 Hard. I was listening to the podcast when he first talked about it.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, man, that sounds scary and sounds like something I need. And
did you do it?
Tying it back to the first point of accountability, my buddy Seth, he and I in March of 2019 decided to do 75 Hard.
Hell yeah.
And I talked about that period of time being pivotal and being a catalyst for change. I mean, that decision, all of those four things that I just mentioned, emphasis on the accountability to have somebody to do it with me.
Yeah, because without that, the rest of it wouldn't have happened.
And wouldn't have mattered. Yeah, it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
And we did that. And the reinvigoration of self, the feeling of not finding yourself again, but the feeling of like your own self-worth and energy and essence of who you used to be or who you are flooding back into your body was this reinvigoration of self that I felt in the second half of 2019 because of mainly those four things: the accountability, the seeking out helpful content and resources.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to come in the form of podcasts. That can be books, that can be therapy, that can be a mentor or a family member or a friend. But definitely seeking out help in some sense, figuring out how you will best receive that help so you can find the right thing that second half of 2019 was then the beginning of the self-development journey, and those were the main things that I needed to find at that time to get me there, to get started. And being 10 years since then, I feel like I've lived so many lives.
Yeah.
And like you said, that man in 2019 that was so broken, so empty, so unfulfilled, so void of purpose, to get from him to today took many lives.
Yeah.
Of experience and of time. And those initial formational moments of really January, February, March of 2019 in taking control of my own life again were only done, I'd say, mainly through accountability, through help. And since then, man, once you open the door of growth and introspection, that shit doesn't close. No, it's
you hit a stride and it's just like floodgates.
Yeah, you get to a certain point and then you're meditating and talking about expansion.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why I feel so passionate today about bringing together men and sharing what I've learned to date, and I definitely want to be better about sharing all of these experiences too, because even in our communities, I feel like most guys don't really know me. They know who I am today. They don't know all of this.
Yeah, I didn't know
And
all of this before today.
Why I feel so passionate about that now is because, one, I had a severe lack of male role models in my life, all throughout my life, until more so the recent 5 years or so. Two, I think the men that need this the most, the help, the guidance, the tough love, are men like me, like how I grew up in a very blue-collar, lower-income household that didn't have a male role model to turn to, banked his life on sport, like a lot of young men do.
Yeah.
Thinking that's the answer to their problems.
In blue-collar areas.
That's the way out.
Yeah.
Not that I was looking for a way out, but that would have been my way out.
Right.
Getting out of my hometown.
Yeah.
But I feel like the men that need it the most are the men that grew up like I did, that were so adverse to these ideas.
Right.
And this is what sparked this thought, was the joke about, you go down, you open enough doors in the growth journey and you start meditating and talking about expansion. 10 years ago, if somebody said that to me, I legitimately would have laughed. Like I would not have taken them seriously, I should say. Because to me, that was woo-woo nonsense.
Right.
Like there's no value in that. What do you mean? If I sit with myself long enough, I'm going to figure out the answers for my life.
Yeah.
The fuck?
Yeah.
Like, I am very cognizant of the fact of how I grew up and where I grew up. And I try to speak to me when I have these opportunities and platforms now to speak to men like we did at Cut, to speak now to whoever listens to this.
Yeah.
I'm speaking to me. I'm speaking to the men that had no semblance of what growth meant, what self-development meant, what purpose was, what fulfillment was, what emotional maturity was, laughing at the idea of solitude and of introspection and of reflection, shutting out emotion because that's what you were either taught or saw or believed was the way to be a man.
Right.
I was that. I was those things. And because I've taken an interest in using my life experiences to teach me something and to look at them as pivotal, course correcting, or trajectory changing moments, I've been able to heal myself in a lot of ways. And so I always keep in mind where I came from and how I was raised. Finally answering your first question. Because I think so many men grow up that same way.
Yeah.
And most of the men that have yet to challenge themselves or look deeper internally, still feel those ways, still feel unfulfilled, with a void of purpose, with a lack of emotional maturity, with a lack of direction or guidance or mentorship, and unable to parse out what's wrong with them or where to start.
So that brings up a lot of thoughts, one of which being, I heard this quote of, we inevitably become the person that a past version of ourself needed. And I think you're speaking to that so much right now. And I know that I've definitely become that as well. And I think when we start to move in that direction and we start to become that person that the past version of ourself needed, we step into what we would call elderdom, of you are an elder in the community, meaning that you are someone who has specific life experience that gives you the ability to help to guide people who are not as far along on their journey. It has nothing to do with age. I mean, we have a guy in one of our men's groups, Joey, who's like 21, and I would say he's an elder because
in a lot of ways, the way he speaks, the way he thinks about life, the amount that he's reflected,
the stuff that he puts out, it's
wise beyond his years, truly.
So much. So it has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with your life experience and what you bring to the community and what you bring to those members of the community who need that personal growth, who need the guidance, who need the accountability, who need the role model, someone they can look up to of like, oh, they did it. And what you were talking about like coming out of the blue collar town, and it's men who come from backgrounds like you come from that need it the most. And so you talking about all of this, it provides an example of this is possible. You know, people don't believe it's possible until it happens, and you're proving that it's possible. And I think that's a big piece of this idea of elderdom and of being an elder in the community. So I wanted to pivot the conversation into that. There was a couple of things that we wanted to talk about with that. I mean, brotherhood is huge, and you are, just completely being a leader in our community with that. You mentioned college and that experience. So the Appalachia retreat that you were telling me about last week. So,
I can start with brotherhood. I loved what you said about we inevitably become the person that we needed as a child. And that's such a great perspective to have, and very true for me. And brotherhood is a project, a community that stems from, I think, a number of different experiences and moments in my life. Really, the impetus for it started during COVID for me. The idea of loneliness, of anxiety. It's really one of the first times that I started battling anxiety in my life, truly, was during COVID. Someone that I don't consider myself an extrovert, only because I gain my energy from being alone and recharging by myself, and I actually prefer that when I can have it, which is hilarious because everybody around here who sees me at workouts and at events constantly,
you're like constantly the center of attention.
It's like, this guy's the biggest extrovert ever. I actually am not. I've trained myself and forced myself into positions of leadership and of putting myself in front of crowds and in front of groups of people to overcome that fear of not being a leader, of not being an extrovert, of not being a natural public speaker, of not knowing how to use my words effectively. So I've intentionally put myself in those spaces over the years to get over that fear. And when those anxieties started to crop up in COVID around, again, not feeling like I had a direction, sense of purpose, probably a lot of similar fears and anxieties that people were having at that time of like, what are we doing? What is this? Obviously the inherent fear of the situation, the looming fear of the entire situation, but that loneliness that came from the isolation,
Yeah.
I think really ignited a lot of deep things for people and internal shit and brought it to the surface. Yeah. I actually, and this is another story that we could spend 30 minutes on, but I will not. And this is one of the most recent pivotal life-changing moments was during COVID. I actually had a panic attack and went to the hospital for it. It was a culmination of things, and I think being new to the world of anxiety and not knowing what it was and not knowing why I was so scared, so lonely, so afraid of the future, of having little direction or purpose, not having much self-confidence, really losing myself again after the years of 2019 and 2020. I guess 2019, where I was like started on this path. This is a quintessential example of growth is not linear, right?
Yeah.
Of 2019 started me up this path where I was going this way, and then COVID really brought it back down.
Yeah.
So having this immensely mentally and emotionally taxing experience of a panic attack, and
they're terrifying,
ending up in the ER for it, I yearned for a sense of community again, and accountability again, and a group of people that thought like I did. A lot of the fears, I think, at that time were on the back of this growth journey that I started, self-development journey that I started in 2019, and still not feeling like I had a tribe, and still not feeling like I had a community of people that got me and understood what I was doing and why I was doing it. So yearning for that after this traumatic experience, I thought for a while, I started pondering this idea of actually starting almost like a virtual brotherhood of this like community of men that, you know, maybe we talked about books or maybe we talked about podcasts, but we came together to like interact and converse about growth.
Yeah.
And about being a man and how do we become better men, because that's what I so deeply wanted and didn't know where to find it anymore because of COVID. And so that idea of, I wanted to call it Elevate, and it was going to be some like sort of virtual community. I obviously didn't act on that, and fortunately things started to return to normal from COVID. That experience that I had was towards the tail end of like the lockdown. So coming out of that, I had started going to the gym again already before all that happened. But then coming out of that helped me reemphasize my mental well-being, because before that, I truly was not considering it. The whole 2019 experience of the professional highs and lows, the feeling so low in life because of void of purpose, finding the content, starting this journey, I, even in those moments, never considered mental health. I just considered what I was doing as necessary to be better. And I didn't know what to call it, right? And so then having this mental health episode and coming out of that thinking, fuck, I need to pay more attention to the things that I'm thinking, the way that I'm feeling, and address that. One of my favorite quotes is something to the extent of, you can lift all the weights you want, you can drink all the water you want, but unless you address the shit that's going on in your head, you're never going to be healthy. And I took that to heart in 2021 by really diving in. And that was diving in internally. That was me making an attempt to now dig deeper in relationships, because I really wanted to find my people and express the way that I was feeling and the things that I was thinking. And that was the first time, probably late 21 to 22, that was the first time in my journey that I actually felt comfortable starting to use my voice and to talk about growth and to talk about my experiences and my journey and start to share those things. So even though I started this path in 2019, in early 2019, probably wasn't for about 3 years later that I felt the confidence to start talking about it and to start seeking deeper relationships. And when you do that, you gotta open up yourself.
Yeah.
You have to open up to be able to form deeper connections with people. So all of that happening in tandem for me in 22 drove this expansive growth of myself, started to help me find my voice. I think I told you the other day that I compartmentalized times in my life. That was the Ballston years. When I first moved to Ballston was the end of 2019.
Okay.
Because I needed a change. I needed to leave Silver Spring, leave that life behind. So I moved to Ballston. COVID happened. Everything I just described happened. That takes me up to February of 23. And so 2022 timeframe where I really started to feel like I was reinvesting in my mental health as well as my physical health. During COVID, I started running and cycling a lot. So I was checking the exercise box, the physical health box. The panic attack happened. I said, I need to turn my focus a little bit more inward. And so then because of that, starting to find my tribes of people, investing in relationships, digging deeper in relationships. 2023, moved to where I live now in South Arlington. I was continuing to grow, continuing to find my voice professionally, was in a better place, was pretty happy with my job and leading in positions of leadership. I was feeling much more confident physically, and that was around the time where I really started to dive into, I think probably catching up to what I talked about before we got on, was early 2023 was when I went to Texas for the BPN half marathon. And so that year of 22, when I was still in Ballston, I had found the likes of Nick Bear and BPN, and I was investing, like I told you, a lot harder into self-development. So books, so more podcasts, consuming.
Yeah.
And that got me to 23 where I said, and I felt like, all right, this is my time that I really want to start getting out into the world and like leaning into these communities that I'm finding because I'm loving it.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with BPN and Bear and Nick Bear and his message and the community that he was building. So I signed up for this half marathon in Texas, not knowing anybody, traveled down, met this group of guys over the Facebook group they created. We still have a group chat together. Nice. Airbnb BPN boys.
Love it.
So great dudes, and what I really needed, I found in the BPN community was like-minded people that were not only like-minded and like on a growth journey, but like fucking driven people.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, just by looking at Instagram, some of the people that, you know, the real big fitness influencers, I mean, a lot of them, I know some of the craziest athletes I've ever met came from this BPN community. And being exposed to that environment, one from an accountability standpoint, but from a mentorship and exposure standpoint, something that men need to do is you need to expose yourself to the type of people you want to be or the type of men you want to be. You need to fucking be around them.
Yeah.
And that was my first initiation into that, of exposing myself to the right people that were out, putting myself at the table where I knew the least, right? Or I was the least knowledgeable person at the table.
Yeah.
I was one of the least fit people there, but I was also one of the least knowledgeable in terms of like, some of these people are far along in their growth journey. I mean, Nick Bear is an animal in his own right, and it's actually hilarious. I think he's also 32. I think we're the same age. Damn. But the empire that he's built, man, if, you know, from a community builder standpoint of someone who steps up from a healthy masculine, I needed that type of environment. And so putting myself in that environment in 2023, that sent me even further along this journey of like, yes, this is the path for me. I need to continue to better myself in all aspects. Physically, yes, but all aspects. And end of 2023, this was like on my, I'm going to continue to challenge myself. You know, I got the Prove Yourself Right tattoo when I was in Austin for that trip. And so I came back from that. That was April of 23, really energized on proving myself right and doing hard shit for me, but for my own growth. And so that's when I signed up for Haymakers for Hope. And Haymakers for Hope, this was another very pivotal, life-changing moment, probably my most recent, where I went into that experience thinking, okay, I'm on this crazy growth journey right now. I'm leveling up in life. So many areas I feel, obviously, still got issues again, but I'm so much better off than where I was a few years ago. I want to close this chapter and keep growing. And I felt like at that time, because the instability from home, the constant moves,
Yeah.
I felt like to close a chapter, I needed to move. And so and you know, that's an escape mechanism in a lot of ways. Not facing things. There were still things underneath that I really needed to face.
Yeah.
And I was growing in a lot of areas. And this is something that, this is maybe a dichotomy of thought for men, is you could be growing in a lot of areas, but there's still shit you're scared of and you're hiding.
Absolutely.
Those two things can be true.
Yeah.
And so that was very true for me in 2023. I was succeeding in areas, and fuck, that's still true for me today. I think it's true for all of us.
Yeah.
But I felt like, all right, I'm going to tackle this really crazy kind of dream. I attended Haymakers 2 years before, both of the years before, and felt like I could have done it.
Yeah.
I remember being there and being like, I think I could do that, you know?
And just for them,
yeah.
What is Haymakers for Hope?
Haymakers for Hope is a charity boxing match, charity boxing event that has been hosted for upwards of a decade across multiple cities in the U.S., raising funds for cancer care, research, survivorship. Phenomenal organization. Go support Haymakers for Hope. Go to one of the events. You're athletic and you want to prove yourself right. Do it. Fight in Haymakers for Hope. It messed my nose up a little bit more than it already was, but it gave me purpose in my life again. And out of that experience, again, I wanted to move. So my thought process was, I'm going to do this fight, and after the fight, I'm going to decide where I want to move. And I was thinking Austin because BPN and folks I knew were down there.
Right.
I was thinking Charlotte because one of my good buddies, Seth, he lived down there at the time. He still does live down there. Philly, I was like, I've always wanted to move back home and live closer to friends from high school and college. So I was thinking about moving, and my goal was to get through the fight and to decide. Get through the fight, and coming out of that experience, one, it was one of the most emotionally and mentally taxing experiences of my life. It taught me what peace was, first of all, and taught me to find it real fucking quick, because you sometimes in that environment, you will need to regulate your nervous system fast.
Yeah.
You get sent on hyperdrive. Your fight or flight is peaking in that type of interaction in a fight scenario. And when I tell you, you have to find peace, I mean, you have to go to a peaceful place or else you're going to freak out and things won't go well for you. So that was one of the most beneficial things that experience taught me. But then coming out of it, I realized that I was trying to escape things in this area, things that I didn't address, things that I didn't create or bring to life. That idea of a men's community, of building my own community, I think was one of the things I was trying to go somewhere else to look for, instead of leveraging what I'd built already and the relationships I built already in the area and do it here. And so coming out of Haymakers, what I realized was the strength of my own community. I raised $23,000, and a lot of that was from people around here.
Wow.
And that showed me the strength in community, but also showed me the strength of my community.
Yeah.
And so that changed my mind. That made me realize that I need to stay, and I owe it to myself, but also people in my communities here, to do this work that I felt called to do in this early calling in COVID. I owed it to myself and to my communities to do it here.
Yeah.
And to bring that sense of elderdom that I was experiencing in my life through my own trials, tribulations, and journey, share that message. And I decided at the turn of 2024 then to dig my roots. This is something that you talked about. I was so scared for so many years to commit to living in one place, to being where my feet were, to investing in a place, in a group of people, because of the traumas that I'd experienced, right? The lack of mentorship, of home, of commitment. One of my deepest, earliest romantic relationships fell apart because of a lack of trust and miscommunication. And so many things that I was running from in my life led to this constant, this sense and feeling of needing to constantly move to reinvent myself or to turn the page into a new chapter in life. And Haymakers, the aftermath of Haymakers for me, made me realize that I didn't need to move to do that, and that I could turn the page and move into a new chapter and elevate myself right here and stay and do that. And it was almost a challenge to myself.
Wow.
To like practice what you preach.
And you were talking earlier about messages from the universe and whatnot.
Yep.
$23,000 raised.
Yeah, in a couple months.
In a couple months, that's a pretty powerful message right there.
Yeah. And so the turn of 24, I said, okay, you've been on the fence for so long. You're getting this calling to stay now. You didn't think you would.
Yeah.
There's another, again, I think Paymaker was probably the most recent pivotal life-changing moment for me, trajectory-changing moment. And I said, fuck it. I'm going to dig in. I'm going to plant myself and root myself here for the foreseeable future. I am not going to think about moving. I'm not going to consider moving. I'm going to prove myself right in that I have a bigger purpose to live out and answer these calls that I've been having, the invitations that I've been getting, I should say. And I'm going to stay and see what happens and see what I can do, see what I can build, see what I can create, see what purpose I can live out here. And I made that mental decision in the power of making firm decisions with yourself. Signing non-negotiable agreements with yourself was something that I did the very beginning of January of 2024. And from that moment, bringing it all back to the things that I've been doing, the things that I do now. Brotherhood came to life in that year of 2024. Create Wellness came to life in that year of 2024. My involvement with Lululemon and the elevation of my voice in the greater community of health and wellness and fitness started in that year of 2024. My involvement in High Rocks and that community and all that I do now in coaching and curating program and doing personal training for High Rocks and being involved in that amazing community, that all started in 2024. From all of those experiences leading up to the point of, again, being sick of my own shit and saying, you need to make a decision. You need to take this invitation, this sign, to move in the direction of your calling. I was in March of 2024, after making that decision, starting to iterate on these things in my mind. I went to a wedding with my two good friends, Alex and Sierra, who I co-founded Create Wellness with. We went to a wedding of one of our mutual friends in Miami, a very inspirational couple who are entrepreneurial, have founded their own businesses, some massive. And we were at this wedding and said to each other, we didn't even really talk about this beforehand. We had been friends for years and didn't really discuss this until that weekend. We were all thinking the same thing, that we were getting this calling to create community in our areas and bringing together all of our lived experience, our networks. We really felt like we could make a positive change in the community in the areas of holistic wellness, in the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the emotional. And so Create Wellness was born out of that weekend. We're coming up on our 1-year celebration in April, which is going to be our 5th event that we're hosting. We've had probably collectively over somewhere close to 400 people come out to these events. Shortly after the creation of Create Wellness, this was June, it was a few months later, I was laying in bed one night and got sick of my own shit of saying I wanted to do something and not doing it. I'm like, there's a reason you stayed here. You told yourself you were going to do this for a reason. You told yourself you were going to bring these ideas to life. Then do it. I was laying in bed one night, very often that I can't sleep, but couldn't sleep because this idea was in my head of, I was getting these downloads again, this invitation to bring to life this men's community. And it was like maybe midnight or later, I took my phone from the nightstand, created, probably in like an hour, just sitting there on my phone in the middle of the night, created a flyer for the first Brotherhood run, created the logo, started the Instagram page, posted the flyer, I think the next day, for like 3 days away. Nice. It was like that week, and I'm like, fuck it, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now.
Hell yeah.
And that was the creation of Brotherhood, was
Wow.
all of that, all of those years of growth, of trials, of tribulations, of non-linear growth, needing and feeling that calling to create the communities that I so desperately wanted and needed for myself. And I started to find and recognized the benefit and the value of the accountability and the exposure. I'm like, I need to do this for other men.
Yeah.
And I need to step into Elderdom that I'm being called to step into. And yeah, I'm 32 years old. I'm not I haven't been doing this for 40 years, but I have a damn good sense of who I am, the growth that I've experienced because of my life, the things that have happened, my approach to reflection, my approach to picking impactful moments in my life, picking them out and analyzing them and using them as catalysts for growth instead of the opposite. I feel like, and I felt like in that moment, I have things to share and to bring to the world. 2023 was the year that I wrote "Use Your Voice" on my whiteboard in my office when I moved to my new space in South Arlington. And everything that happened in 24 until now has been the direct result of everything I just described, that vision of using my voice and what it would look like, and moving through fear, responding to the calling, to the invitations that you get from the world, identifying those moments in time where, hey, I was supposed to be an athlete. No, you're not. Hey, you're supposed to start a family and make a home. Parents separate. No, you're not. Hey, you're supposed to go down this path of like being this badass businessman. And not to say that I'm not doing that or not pursuing that in some fashion, but you're supposed to grind at work. You're supposed to prove them wrong. No, you're not. All of these moments in time where something was happening in my life to teach me a lesson. Yeah, in the moment it's really hard to realize that, but we all have two options in life, and it is how we react and respond. It is good or bad. Those are your options.
Yeah.
Is in the response to the happenings, to the events, to the experiences. What is the energy you're going to assign to the experiences of your life? Are you going to assign positive, good energy to these things and use them as catalysts for growth? Or are you going to disregard the signs that maybe you need to change, or change your path, or change something about your life? You need to go in a different direction than what you thought. Stepping into elderdom, despite your age, despite your imposter syndrome, which I've felt plenty times, means using your voice for good, creating positive change in the communities that you're a part of, no matter how big or how small. It can be one person, it can be 1,000 people, it can be 1,000,000 people.
Yeah.
Having that rooted, grounded sense of who you are and where you came from, sharing how you got to where you are, the right and the wrong decisions, supporting and uplifting other people, because that helps you support and uplift yourself, not in spite of yourself, seeking accountability and exposure, putting yourself in the right places, around the right people that are maybe only one step ahead of you, but that gives you something to look up to, that gives you a mentor, that gives you the accountability that you need to be maybe pulled along if you need the tug, gives you the tough love if you need the tough love.
Yeah.
I think all of those things play into what elderdom means and how it has shown up in my life, how I've answered that calling, how I plan to continue to answer that calling in bigger and bigger ways. This is just the beginning. I'm like, the most exciting thing for me in the last few years is recognizing that once you start your growth journey, it is just the beginning. Attainment of the highest version of yourself is unrealistic. We may not ever get there, any of us, but recognizing that it is the path towards that. That's life. The path towards attainment of the highest version of yourself. It's all the things that happen in between who you are today and who you want to be when you die.
Yeah.
That gap in time is your life. And so the point is to press on towards that highest version. Growth is not linear, but over time, your graph of life will look like a positive increase.
Yeah.
Positive trajectory. And for me, stepping into elderdom and stepping into these positions of leadership feels innate. It feels like my calling. And all of those times when I was younger, when I would force myself through fear to step out in front of the line, to speak out in front of the class, to take the leadership role in the club, to be the first one to do drills in practice, those were all parts of my calling. Pressing on through fear is a part of life. And if you look back at all those times you pressed on through fear, through the fear of those unknown situations, and you made the right choice, you made the choice for good, for positive, there's nothing gained from going to the end of the line in drills. You still have to do the drill.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing gained from sitting back in a college class, a small college class. I went to a liberal arts school. Classes were like 10, 20 people.
Yeah. Same.
There's nothing gained from sitting in the back of class and not raising your hand.
Yeah.
And not contributing to the conversation. You're not learning anything that way. So all of those moments of pressing on through your fears will eventually lead you to, or towards, and lead you on that path of exponential growth towards your highest self. I think that is all encompassing, like, one, kind of a microcosm of life, but two, this idea of elderdom and how do we show up. That's how. And that's a vision for what everybody should do is press on through fear. But the ones that do and get the calling to share about those experiences, those are the elders.
Wow. I don't know if I have anything to add to that.
I think there's always an opportunity to continue conversation after you've had time to reflect on it.
Yeah.
It's, coming into, in this point in my life and being much more open to deeper exchange, opening myself up. This is actually the first time that I've talked about a lot of those experiences for someone, outside of people close to me, and publicizing them.
Yeah.
And it feels good, but it also feels like the right thing to do. It also feels like you said that hearing people say the things that you might want to say or that you need to hear, seeing people do the things that you might want to do, that's how you create a positive change, right? And leave a lasting impact, is by sharing your experience and leading by example.
Yeah.
And in this instance, having this opportunity to share my own life experience and lead by example, I'm very grateful for and humbled by. I hope it's not the first time. And I think we have a lot more conversation that we can dig into. And I also think there's value in pausing and stepping back to reflect.
There's two thoughts I had that I wanted to kind of tie themes across or provide a little perspective on what you just said. You said it at some point in that last bout, you haven't been doing this for 40 years. Your growth journey started in 2019. It's 2025 now. Your real journey started in 23.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, and to tie it back to the imposter syndrome that you mentioned as well, I think a lot of people, when they feel that calling to step into elderdom and to share their experience and to be a guide, I think a lot of people have this imposter syndrome of, well, what do I know? I've only been doing this I'm only 2 years into my growth journey, 5 years into my growth. I'm not some, pick your elder who's been at the game for 40 years, right? I'm not this guy who knows everything and has all the data to back it up. Sometimes learning from that guy is too intimidating and
or unrelatable.
Or unrelatable, because that guy is so far into his journey that, like we were talking about earlier, you in college or you in high school, having that asthma in high school, looking to where you are now, so far
unrecognizable,
unrelatable, for all intents and purposes, to that version of you, unattainable.
Yes.
And sometimes it's the same thing when we're looking at elders and we're looking at mentors. Sometimes you see that person, you're just getting started on your growth journey, you see that person who's 40 years into it, unrelatable, unattainable. That's not a good mentor for you. If that's how you're viewing that person, then that's not the person you should be following.
Right.
Sometimes the best person to follow is the person who's just 1 or 2 steps ahead of you.
Yeah.
Who's willing to turn back and go, hey, come with me.
Yes.
Sometimes those are the most powerful elders, because those are the relatable ones. Because someone who's here can see how you got to there 3 steps ahead.
Yes.
And think to themselves, oh yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, that's not that far off.
No. All that to say, I think what we're doing, what you're doing, and I say we because my personal growth journey really started 3 years ago this week, actually. But the things that we're doing, the things that you're doing, and the way that you're putting yourself out there and being a guide and being an elder and speaking up and sharing all of these things in a setting like this is so powerful because it's relatable to that person who is just starting to get that inkling in the back of their head that they need to make a change.
Mm-hmm. I'll wrap my thoughts to follow up to exactly what you just said. And now this is the second time I'm going to say it, and I'm going to have to look online to see who actually said it and get the real quote. But there's this saying that 80% of men hear that calling. They hear the phone ringing in the next room. Only about 40 to 50% of men will go into the room to check on it. And when they get in there, only about 10% of men will actually pick up the phone and answer. And to all of what we're saying, you need to see somebody doing it before you feel comfortable doing it, or before you are able to maybe push through the fear or the friction that's restricting you from answering that phone, from answering the call. And that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to be the impetus, to be the guide, to be that elder 1 or 2 steps ahead that says, I've been there, I get it, I'm here for you, let's grow together, let's heal together, because I'm still healing and I'm still growing.
Yeah.
I am not, again, 80 years old and reaching the end of my life and reaching enlightenment. This is like, it's very real that I am on this journey right now myself. And it's very real that I have a lot of shit that I still want to work on myself. But it's also very real that there are things that I've become pretty good at, and things that I've healed, and things that I've fixed. Again, both of those things can be true.
Yeah.
And that is the person that I want to be. I've found my purpose in this point in my life, to be that elder and be that guide. And hopefully somebody has heard this and thought maybe it's changed their mind about the idea of personal growth and development and reflection, that you don't need to be you don't need to be predisposed to meditation. You don't have to be taught meditation when you're young to learn how to sit with yourself and be in stillness. These are things that can be learned and taught and exercised as an adult. We all have the power to do these things. We all have the power to grow. We all have the ability to control our lives. That is free will, is the ability to make a choice to control your life, to take control, and to choose the good, choose the positive reaction to life. We can't control life. We can only control the way we respond to it. And assigning that positive or negative or good or bad connotation, because nothing is inherently good or bad, that is the goal.
Fucking hell.
Shall we close?
Yeah.
Let's close.
I think that's it. Well, first I want to recognize that, as you said, this is the first time that you're sharing a lot of this outside of your close network. Mm-hmm. And I feel very grateful and very privileged to be the facilitator of your story out to people who need to hear it.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on and sharing all that.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. Yeah. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Definitely won't be the last.
Absolutely not.
Cool, dude.
Thanks, man.
Hell yeah. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Appreciate you.
That was fun.
Yeah. All right, that was my interview with Dan. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said at the beginning, and as always, if you haven't yet subscribed to the show and you enjoyed this conversation, please hit that subscribe button to make sure that you get every episode downloaded directly to your device right when they come out. Also, if you enjoyed this conversation, you want to hear more, and you want to support the show, please leave a review. It really helps the show. And send this one to a friend who you think might benefit from it, or who you think might enjoy it. I'm going to leave Dan's Instagram handle in the show notes so that you can connect with him if you would like to. And one last thing. I wrote a chapter in a book. The book is called Sacred Spaces Volume 3. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding it up right here. This book is a group write book. So there are 25 authors on this book. I'm one of 25 authors. My chapter is chapter number 21, and the chapter is titled The Male Vacancy Project: Unmasking Masculinity for the Modern Man. I go into the details on getting out of an abusive relationship, how that affected me, and my healing journey after that, and how I searched for what it means to be a man in this modern world. So if you're interested in reading more about my experience, or if you've had a similar experience, I highly recommend you buy this book and read my chapter. And I finished the chapter with kind of a code of ethics for men, some principles to live by that I think are universal, and some journal prompts to help you get started on your healing journey if you are interested in starting a growth journey or starting a healing journey, or if you're already on one and you just want to go a little bit deeper. There's a couple journal prompts in there to help you go a little bit deeper with yourself. So buy the book, check out my chapter, check out the other chapters, because the other 24 authors in this book are absolutely incredible. And I'm going to leave the link to Amazon to buy the book in the show notes. So go check it out. And that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, Amadeus signing off.